It's good. It's good. Hello. This is my friend Claire. She's one of my knitting buddies, and she's agreed to be a model today. I'm wondering if you can hear me. I'm back from the microphone a little bit. So if you can hear me, let me know. Let me know what you think of the volume, please. Because I think I can turn the volume up. I'm not sure. Let me know. I'm going to wait and see what somebody says. But anyway, today is Sunday, March 24th. Can you believe it already? It seems like we were just in the middle of December and January, and it was freezing cold. Here in Bakersfield, I think it's supposed to be in the mid-70s today. Spring is definitely here. My allergies have kicked in like you would not believe. And everybody's getting spring fever and wanting to do new things. It's really fun. So how's the volume? Okay, you can hear me. Great. I haven't stood this far back from the speaker before. So I wanted to show you a lot of things that you can do with the yoke before you think about dividing for the sleeves. Well, actually, you should think about dividing for the sleeves, but how can you adjust it when you're dividing? And then I have some questions to answer from the Ravelry group, of course. I have a couple of books that I have out to share. I have some yarn. Claire's being my helper. Thank you. I have some yarn that Kurt recommended that I try, and I got their sampler that I'm going to show you. Oh my goodness, it's so exciting. It makes me want to start knitting something new immediately. So hello, everybody. I'm standing way back from my computer, so I can't really read what you're saying, but I know you're all there, and hello, and I appreciate your being here. For those who've never viewed my live streams before, if you're new today or you happen to watch this later, these are about knitting and live. But of course, if you watch later, the questions that people ask live are all still there and you can look at them. You just can't put in your question at that time. If you put a question after the live stream's over, I still answer you because it's still posted and I can still see it. So it's just about knitting, and we're in the middle of doing a yoke sweater from the top down that each one of us is designing ourselves. I have a knit along called ITAG-Yoke that is on Ravelry by Suzanne, Bryan. That's me. And in that, I teach you all of the things that you need. I give you the elements that you need to create your own yoke sweater top down. And it can either be a pullover or a cardigan. And for the cardigan, you can either knit it flat or put a steek in it, as I have a steek here for this sweater. So Claire has agreed to model for me. And it's so fun to see my sweater on somebody that I can actually look at it. So it's on waist yarn. She's 2 sizes smaller than me. She would wear a size 40 finished, and I'm going to have mine be larger. So I have pinned a little bit back together in the back to take up the difference here. But this is the number of stitches that would be for her size. There is this extra area in the front where my steek is going to be, but that will be replaced by the button band. So the button band won't be quite this wide, but you get an idea. When you're thinking about constructing your yoke, you want to be aware of where the motifs are. And you need to have them so that they're balanced. Now I have starting with a full motif on either side of the center front, but it could be a half motif on either side. It doesn't really matter as long as it's balanced. Then for myself, I have an odd number of 17. Each one of these motifs is 28 stitches wide. For Claire, I removed 1 motif. So she is 16 motifs wide. So there are 8 on the front plus the steek, and 8 on the back, which pushes the 8 towards the back just a little bit because of the steek. For a person who their sizes, which we've been talking a lot about, like if your arm size and your body size fall in the same size range, then when you are going to separate the yoke off for the sleeves, you would just follow the standard centering the sleeves to the side of the body, right? So you would have the same number of stitches minus the steek on the front as you do the back, with the sleeves being divided off on each side. Now this yoke isn't quite long enough to divide off yet. This yoke is little over like 6 1/8 inches long, and it needs to be another couple of inches. In fact, I'm going to make it for me 9 inches. The yoke is going to be 9 inches long. And let's compare that to the distance from here to the armpit. Let's put something here. My handy armpit marker.
There you go.
Okay, so let's just measure from the top down. For her, it's 8. I'm measuring from the top of the shoulder down to the top of that big knitting needle, and I get 8 inches. For me, it's 9 inches. My armhole depth is 9 inches, and my yoke depth is also going to be 9 inches. So the yoke depth, when it's 9 inches here, will come down here where my finger is. But when it's over here, it'll come down to right here, the top of her shoulder. If I go 9 inches to here, it's right here on her arm. Okay, so it curves down. It comes because it's a yoke, it's a circle, right? So it's going to curve. It'll be up higher over here where the armpits are and lower in the front because of the curve. In fact, if you actually, I'm going to lift it over your head, Claire. Sure. If you take it up, you can see that it is a circle. It's a perfect circle. Okay. And that's why it is related to a pie shawl, as I pointed out in the tutorial. So let's say that your arm sizes don't match your bust, that you have skinny arms and you have a bigger bust. Then you would allow more of the yoke to be for the bust and less for the arms. This is the point where you can make that decision. Up till this point, there's been no decision made about exactly where the arms are going to break off from the yoke. Let's say your arms are bigger than your body in relativity as far as the sizes go, then you would have more stitches for the arms and less for the body. Because when we calculated this, we calculated it based upon the upper arm circumference plus the upper body circumference minus the underarm connecting areas, right? So that gives us a full circumference going around the outside of the body comfortably with some ease. Now, there's another group of people. That's the group of people that have a large bust. So if you measure, the way you figure that out is using a sports bra or a tight tank top or something that you can pin to some fabric that won't move. You have a friend, you raise your arm up and you have a friend mark with a pin, a safety pin, right here, directly under your armpit, straight down in the middle. Same thing on the other side. Then you measure from armpit to armpit in the center across the bust, and armpit from armpit across the back, and you compare the two. Now, it's normal to have for women to have a couple inches larger in the front than the back, and knitting does stretch. So if you have like 2 or less inches difference, I wouldn't attempt to make any correction for that. But some women are bustier, and let's say you have a 4 or 5 or 6 inch difference from the front from the back, then you can adjust this in the yoke. It's super easy. You would just move more of the fabric to the front, and you would connect in the back more and over here. So now you have a lot more fabric in the front, and effectively that moves the center of the neck forward. It moves it forward on the shoulders. Up here is the center of the neck now, but if you moved more of the fabric forward for the bust, you would be moving the center of the fabric forward also. And that means that this will hang a little bit lower. But most women that have larger busts, it comes out. So it's not like it's going to hang down towards the floor more. It's like it's just going to come out more before it hangs down. Does that make sense? I wanted to be able to demonstrate that with the yoke, because before you divide off, that's when you have an opportunity to make these changes. You can actually try it on and do it. And I want to talk about one more thing, and that is, what if your yoke turned out way too big? Okay. You can adjust it at this time. You can, if it's a cardigan, not a pullover, you can cut it down the center. You can make a steek and remove part of the fabric. You would have to reinforce the stitches, of course. That's a last ditch effort. You don't want to plan for doing that. But if you don't want to reknit your whole yoke, you can steek it down the front if you were going to make a cardigan anyway. What else? There's so many other things that I want to talk about here. Oh, the last thing I want to say is when you are dividing off for the arms, make sure that you have them equal. The design is equal over the armpits on either side. So you want to start at the center back and then move forward and choose to divide off for the arms at the same point in the design and the same point in the design here. So you can see how the design's symmetrical. You can do a little test. I took some, just some bulb pins. You could use safety pins. And you can actually do a test when you get to this point. Let's say that you wanted to do it, put your arm down just a little bit. You wanted to divide off here and here. You can actually pin through the fabric on the front and in the point in the back where you want to connect it. And you can pin under the arm and check to see. And I put these pins, it's 3 inches in length because that's how long I want my underarm, but you would put the length you want. And now it's pinned and it looks a little tight. It's pushing up under her armpit up there, see, a little bit. So that means this yoke isn't long enough yet. You would do the same thing on the other side. And then that's how you can check to see if it's comfortable for you and if it's long enough. And I highly recommend trying the yoke on as you go. Because even though you've done all your gauge swatches and everything, you know, things can change. Your tension can change. The mood you're in when you're knitting can really affect the size of your stitches. So it's always good to double check, try it on several times. So let's see if we have any questions about this before I take it off of Clair. Okay, I'm just going to take one off. Okay, so let me get up here and read these.
Okay, you want to sit?
Let's see. So remember, if you're going to ask a question, put it in all caps so I can see it. I see everybody. Hello.
Oh, Berlin.
Hello, people. I see a lot of people I know on here. Thank you for joining me. Okay. Question. I'm looking for a question. Everybody's saying hi. I think it's really fun. We have such a, oh, here, Angela Childress. Question. When you do measure, do you use special tools to measure like sewing seamstresses do? Well, I don't know. I don't know what special tools sewing seamstresses use. I've always just used measuring tape. I use a hard ruler or a measuring tape. I have tons of measuring tapes. I use a measuring tape. I don't have any special seamstress tools that I use, no. But if you can recommend some, I would gladly look at them. Okay, this is from Leslie Dunn. Question. I have no friend. Are there any tricks for measuring yourself? Also, is it helpful to wear the same bra I was wearing when I first measured? My bust moves a lot depending on my bra. That is such an excellent question because actually, when you're measuring yourself for a sweater that you're going to knit, I would wear the bra that you plan on wearing with that sweater or a similar style of bra so that you can measure your accurate measurements for that sweater. I know bras can make a huge difference on your measurements.
I wore my big one today.
Claire says she wore her big one today. She's so funny. She makes a good model. Okay, so that's a good question. That's a very good question. But if you don't have a friend, if you are wearing a bra, and you want to find you could even just use the side seam in the bra. Now my bra has a side seam right here and a side seam right here.
You might be able to do it yourself.
But to find the center of your armpit,
yeah,
that's not so easy. And then measuring from the front to the front.
That's a good question. Where is the center of my armpit?
Another thing you can do is lay your bra down and see what the back is compared to the front. You know where the outside of the bra cup fits you. Does it come into your armpit? Mine comes about in the center of my armpit. I think each person is going to be different, but you just have to look at that. That's a good question, and I don't have a really good answer for it. Okay. Lillian Rojas, question. How deep can a section alter an increase, after an increase be, before you'd need to add another increase. I'm thinking at some point it would start to curl up and no longer be a circle. Well, each time you make an increase, let's hold this up again. So my last increase round, I did an increase round right at the neck. Then the next, and here's the short rows. This is the back neck where I have it clipped together. Let's turn it around and look at the front neck. So here's the front where the steek is. So there's no short rows here. And the very first, right after the cast on, I did my first increase round. Here is my second increase round. My third increase round is distributed in these stitches right here, and there will not be a fourth increase round because this one can be about this wide. This one can be about 4.5 inches wide before I would have to add another round. So when we were doing the calculating for your yoke from the very beginning, and we used that first number, that is your chest circumference plus your arm circumferences minus the underarms. And then we worked backwards. We figured out how big your neck's going to be and then divided the difference in stitches between 3 or 4 or how many sets of increases you want to have. That's setting you up for a circle. I chose mine to be 3 sets. So I have 1 directly after the neck. That's 1. 2 is 2 inches away. The third one was 4 inches away, but I increased enough stitches that it would account for the next 4 inches. So I could work out another 4 inches past that before the circle started curling up because there weren't enough stitches. Because it's knitting, when you add those stitches, like right here at the neck, see, there's no puckering. There's a little bit of puckering, but it's not anything significant, and that will come out with blocking. I have steamed this a little bit to show it to you, but I have not blocked it yet. So you can see around the neck here, there's a little bit, but nothing tremendous. And when Claire's wearing it,
I didn't notice it at all.
I don't notice any puckers anywhere. There's no puckers. It looks pretty. It's pretty good. So you can see this increase round right here. It's right above where my stitch pattern started. And not only is that an increase round, I still increased an extra stitch per inch to accommodate the difference in the stitch gauge of the stranded versus the stitch gauge of the stockinette stitch pattern.
Where was the next one? Right about there?
It was right, it's in here. I did them over several rows. So in this area in here, in this area, there's increases distributed. So I didn't do them in a row. I distributed them over several rows to allow the design, because these are, you'll often see this type of a design in a yoke. It's like a little tree. You'll see this often. It'll either be going up this way or it can go down. It doesn't matter, but it allows you to put your increases between the branches of the tree invisibly. And I used that method. You'll see that a lot in yokes or in stranded knitting for yokes. So let's see some more questions. Oh, Cindy says, hi, Claire.
Hello.
Michelle Forbes, question. Are you using 1 or 2 circular needles? Are there any advantages to this over magic loop? When I was doing the neck, I used 2 until the neck got big enough that I could put it on 1. This is on waste yarn right now, but when I'm knitting it, I have it on 1 24-inch circular needle. That's all. If I had heavier yarn or more stitches, I might go up to the next length of needle. But I try to use the shortest needle possible that I can fit all the stitches on, because I don't spend a lot of time schlepping the stitches around the cable. If the cable is much longer, you spend a lot of time pushing your stitches around the cable. I don't want to do that. So I can knit almost all my sweaters on a 24-inch circular needle. That's a good question. Vicki Luxton, I do not know how to use more than 1 circular needle. Can you explain how to use 2 circular needles? Yes. Let me go get a sock. I'll be right back.
Okay. There was one right on the...
There's one right in here, in this bag. There's my black sock.
Perfect.
I found the yarn. The sock's in. Here's the sock. Okay. So I'm working this sock.
You want to sit down?
Yeah, let me sit down there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Don't leave. But okay, so I have this sock, and I know it's black yarn. It's hard to see, but I have it on 2 circular needles. So this is for my son, and it's 72 stitches. So that means there's 36 stitches on each needle. This is the needle that's on my side of the sock. This is the needle that's on your side of the sock. When you're knitting from when you're knitting on a needle, you choose the other end of the same needle. For example, my next stitches will be on this needle. So I pull this stitch up into action, this needle up into action. Then I find the other end of that needle that the stitches are on, and I go like this. And now I know that that's the end I'm going to knit with. The other needle's just hanging down. It's not in action. I never knit from one needle to the other. That's the mistake. So, and I don't use magic loop. I could explain it to you, but it's not something I can show you here on a big screen. It'd have to be facing down like I do with my hands. And this really isn't good on a big screen either. But when you're knitting with 2 circular needles, you always knit from one needle to the same needle. The stitches never leave that needle, that cable. The other needle, you use both ends of that needle on either end of the cable. You never mix one cable with the other. Okay? Good question. Let's see who else is next on here. Jane Hart. Suzanne, would you show the inside of your yoke and your floats? Yes.
Oh, good idea.
Thank you. Here's the inside of my yoke. And here are my floats. Now up in here where we've got these little branches going on, I've got all different lengths of floats. So it's not very organized on the back side, but it's same between section to section. Then when I get up into the little checkerboard place, you can see it's very organized. And now I'm into the longer floats again, where I'm getting sections between here. Okay. The thing about floats is my rule of thumb is to never make them more than 1 inch long. So I'm getting 8 stitches to the inch here. So after 7 stitches, I would catch it. If I have like 8 stitches in a row, I would catch it somewhere. And I try to catch it, for example, there's some big sections here in the yellow. I would catch it if I could right above above a red stitch. So if I have to knit the yellow all the way across here above this red stitch, that's where I would catch it. I wouldn't necessarily catch it right in the middle. I try to catch it above a stitch that's of the color that I'm catching. That way it's less obvious. So then I have these longer floats on that side, but where I'm catching them is right above a red stitch. Okay? Okay. This is Urgent Artesia, schlepping stitches efficiently. This should be the title to a Suzanne video. No, really, would love a video on knitting efficiently. Yes. I could show that sometime because, and the difference between knitting on straight needles, something really big on straight needles versus knitting something on a circular needle. There's a huge difference in your tension because of the weight of the project and how it leverages the needles. Okay. Amber's telling me about seamstress measuring tapes. Those sound interesting. I'll have to look them up. Very cool. Leslie Dunn, question. We took measurements for bust points from center and bust point from the depth of shoulder. What are these measurements for? Can they help us with bust shaping? Well, initially I was going to show you another way to do bust shaping with this tutorial. You know, for those that did the ITAG cardigan, I showed one way of doing bust shaping, and that was clustering the short rows over on the sides. There's another way where you can actually bring the short rows out closer to the bust point. You need to know where the bust point is in that case because you don't want the short rows coming right out to the bust point. That doesn't look very good. It's like an arrow, like this. It doesn't look very good. So you need to know where the bust point is so that you can stop short of that when you're doing your short rows. And poor Francoise, I wrote all that up. And then during the night, I got to thinking, you know, with the yoke, for a lot of people, chances are their yoke is going to interfere with that same area once the yoke comes down. See, it's going to interfere. So doing that type of bust shaping is not compatible with a yoke. So, but you do need to know where the bust points are in relationship to your design. Come over here again, Claire, please. And this is another point for your yoke when you try it on. For example, my little design here, it turns out, luckily, that this is coming over here and this is coming more towards the center. It's not pointing right to her bust points. That doesn't look particularly attractive either. And I've seen, and go on Ravelry and start looking, because you'll see these all over the place, where a design element falls right at or is pointing to the bust point. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll just, and you don't want to have that on your own sweater, because once you see it on your own sweater, you'll never wear that sweater again, no matter how beautiful it is. This is so pretty. I love it. Oh my God.
It's gorgeous. Gorgeous.
What I'm going to do on this one is I'm almost finished with the motif. It's got about 5 more rows, and then I have to do a little bit of yellow and my yoke will be done. But I'm going to carry this motif all the way down the front and this one all the way down the front on either side of the button band. And it's going to be really interesting. And it's going to be an interesting technique, because what I'm going to do is work this kind of in an intarsia, modified intarsia method to keep the stranding just in that area when you're knitting flat, because once, well, actually I'll be knitting in the round, but I don't want to carry that yarn all the way around to the other side. So I'm going to work these. The red will be worked flat. The yellow will always be in the round. So I'll make a video when I do it. I think it's going to be really interesting. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. That was a good question. Okay, I'm at the bottom of the questions here. So I'm going to let Claire move again. I'm going to show you the books that I have to share for this week. And
Oh, don't forget the yarn.
well, let's look at this yarn. Kurt Payne. Kurt, are you on here? I saw you on here earlier. Kurt recommended some yarn to me that is a woolen spun yarn. It's really nice for stranded knitting. And I went ahead and I bought their little sample pack. It was like $80. But it's a little skein of all the colors minus the black. They fell off the end up here. But I thought you'd like to see this. These little skeins are, they look like they're maybe 10 grams each. Let's see. 10 grams, I guess. They're 10 grams each. So it gives you, and it's woolen spun yarn. Let me show you woolen spun yarn. Woolen spun yarn. I'll undo one of these. They're so pretty. Woolen spun yarn is perfect for working stranded knitting. First of all, you can see that it sticks to itself. See that? So it's actually called sticky. It's not sticky like this. It sticks to itself. So when you're doing your stranding and you're doing your floats, and when you're cutting your steeks, it doesn't unravel. It doesn't fall apart. I don't want to destroy my little, here's the end. Okay, so let me hold it in front of my blue. Woolen spun, this is a 2-ply. It means that it's not spun tightly. It's spun fairly loosely. The individual plies are spun loosely, and the two together are spun very loosely. And you'll see that it breaks very easily. Do you see? I can just pull it apart. Because it's Shetland wool, and Shetland has a short staple length. It's a very fine wool. It is a little bit itchier than merino. So it's not something necessarily that you're going to wear right next to your skin, but because it's woolen spun, it has a lot of air in it, and the air provides the insulating factor versus this is my swatch, but this is tighter spun yarn. And see, if I hold my fingers that close together, I would never be able to break it. I have to hold my hands further apart. So it seems fragile, but once you knit it up, it is not. And it's very, very warm. And the wealth of colors is what is really fun to play with. When I opened this, I wanted to start knitting immediately. It's got some gorgeous colors in there. So that's one thing I wanted to share with you. I also have some books today. People ask me what I recommend. All 3 of these I would recommend owning. I've shown you this one before. This one is called Little Red in the City, and it's by Ysolda Teague. And she put this out I think she self-published it, and she published this in 2011. The first, I would say, 25% of the book is about fitting for people who don't have standard size figures. She talks about bust shaping. She talks about math. There's math in here. She shows you how to make the calculations. But it's all about gauge, yarn, but fitting your body. She talks about altering things to fit different shapes of bodies. This is one of the first books that I bought that really made sense to me on how to alter your own knitwear. It's a good book, and you can get an ebook on it too. I'm not sure, but it is in depth and really, really good. The next book, this is by Sally Melville, and it's called Knitting Pattern Essentials. And this is just like what we've been doing. She starts with gauge swatches. She talks about body sizes, but she also talks about what looks good on different sizes and shapes of people. It's very interesting. I'll show you some of her diagrams. She has different neck shapes, different body shapes. I mean, the front shapes. She does not talk about yokes, though. Yokes are not in here. But I really like stuff like this, where she tells like what length looks good on who, how to figure out your balance point, short versus long versus not the right length versus the right length. This is a good book. This is, if you're interested in altering your knitting or pattern writing, it's very good for pattern writing too. She talks about in-depth shoulder shaping, just, you know, whether you want to have a scoop neck or a round neck or a boat neck, but she does not talk about yokes. I found these because I was looking for stuff on yokes. This one's also really good. This is by Maggie Righetti, and it's called Sweater Design in Plain English. I love Maggie Righetti. She has this one too, which I also like. It's Knitting in Plain English. It's the first one that I got of hers. And this is the one where I found out tips that help me get even gauge, even tension in my knitting, especially on the edges. So she has little tips and tricks. There's no patterns in here. There's no pattern. It's just writing. It's all written. It's all words, see? So this is something you read a little bit before you go to bed at night, and then you have to set it down. But it's definitely worth reading. You'll have a lot of aha moments. Same with her Sweater Design in Plain English. She talks again about body shapes, understanding body shapes, and all the same things that Sally Melville, only it's and how to get the right measurements, getting the right measurements, where to measure your body, the different types of bodies. I love these kinds of books. This was what understanding the lingo of knitting, and she's not talking about the words of knitting. She's talking about what does the fabric do, understanding what the fabric does. What does a knit two together do? What does an SSK do? How does it change the fabric? Colors. Again, she goes into garments and how they look good or don't look good on different people's, what part of the body to emphasize, how to figure out how much yarn you're going to need, how to put your schematics together, how to avoid disasters, very much like what we talk about. And I think she did have something. Let's see what she said about a yoked sweater designing, 344, 345. Because I was looking about the answer for measuring where we should measure the depth of the yoke. I'm having a really hard time finding that information. 334. Principles of constructing a circular yoke. She starts out saying there need to be 4 increases per row or 4 decreases per row. And that's what we based all of ours on. And she does not give you any clues. There's not even a drawing on a yoke. So I'm still looking for that. I want the definitive answer on where do you measure the yoke on your body for the schematic to start with before you actually knit your yoke. Okay, let's see who else has been on here and what questions they asked. Then I'll go to the questions from Ravelry, okay? Okay. Okay. I'm caught up now. Nina Kellen, question. Based on what you just said about trapping floats above the similar color, what is your comment on trying not to ladder traps above each other? I have often seen that I do that same thing. So if there's a large piece, and I don't think let me see if I have that swatch here. My little Scotty dogs are so darn cute. Here they are. This is a good example. This is my little Scotty dog swatch. So the reason I made this swatch is because you have these large areas of solid color in between the others, although it's stranded. This could easily be worked as an intarsia project, but I worked it as a stranded project on purpose. So when you have a large area, like right here, so you cannot see any of my white floats showing through. Do you see that? But I did catch them. This is that same area. You can see I caught them, but I stagger them. See how there's no two right above each other. Because if you put two, one on top of the other in a large area like this, it will show through to the front of your work. And it's hard to conceal it. This is a really good video. If you want to watch, it's over on my other channel. I'll put a link to, when Diana does the notes here, we can put a link to this. I have a couple. I have one for doing, this is for working stranded knitting flat, actually. So I show how to catch the floats when you're doing a right side row. And then I show how to catch the floats when you're doing a wrong side row on this particular video. See, it still has stretch. And when I stretch it, the floats don't show through. See? I'm really stretching it. Isn't it cute? Cute little Scotty dogs. Okay, let me see. There was another part to that question. Oh, that was about stacking them. I try to not stack them unless they're being stacked. Well, you can't even do that, stack above the same color. Like on this swatch, you know, I tried to stack them. Like if I have a long area here, I didn't stack them. I tried to catch them right over the top. So this might be like 10 stitches in yellow here, but on the 7th stitch, or 8th stitch, I could catch it right here. So there's 7 without catch, then it's caught right there, and then 2 more worked until I come to the red again. That way it doesn't affect the front of the fabric. Okay. Okay. Basically, the colors are going to trapping colors above each other. What are you going to doing with the yarn? Oh, I don't know yet. I don't know yet, but the colors are so gorgeous. Oh my goodness. It's going to be fun. It just inspires me. I think I'm going to set it on I have a seat, a window seat next to the chair where I sit, where I knit. I might set it over there, Joe. I can just look at it all the time. Okay, Kurt says, question. Some of your new yarns you'll find are lamb's wool rather than Shetland, and they are divine. There is a tick box on the side of the label. Enjoy. Thank you. And thanks for recommending it, Kurt. It's really fun. I just have to turn and look at it. It's so cool. Question part 2 for Nina. What is your advice to prevent show through? When I did these little videos, I show you how to keep the traps from showing through to the front side. It's about having the right tension on the trapping and the float. So I wish I had a magnifying glass. Here is a strand that's going to be trapped right here. Do you see that? It's being trapped by this stitch right here. So if this strand is just the right tension, it's just sliding right underneath that, and it's not being pulled through to the front. I show in that video exactly how to do that. It's just how you tug it just a little bit as you're catching it, it keeps it from falling on top of the stitch, but to fall behind it. It's when the trap falls on top of the stitch that you're working, like on top of the head of the yarn. Here's the head of the stitch right here. If the trap falls on top of it, it tends to show through to the front of the work. If it falls behind it, it doesn't. And it's just a little trick that you can do, and you can see it on that video. Urgent says, I love Sally Melville. I do too. I've never taken a class from her, although I met her in an elevator one time, and she's really short. I'm really tall. I'm 5'10", but she might be like 5'4" or something. So she was really short. That's all I can say about her because I've never talked to her or taken a class, but I love her books. Maggie Righetti. I love Maggie Righetti too. I mean, she's just, and I don't even know where she lives. I've never seen her or met her or anything, but she writes in a style that you can read like a novel reading about knitting. Now, it's not a murder mystery or anything like that, but it's something you can just sit and read. She actually makes you chuckle sometimes. It's pretty good. Leslie Dunn, question. Suzanne, do you have plans to do a video on ladder back jacquard? Yes, it's on my video list. And I have some comments that I'll make about it when I do those videos. Lucy Keel, question. What is the brand name of your yarn sample pack? The brand name is, oh yes, it's Super Soft Lamb's Wool. It's Wee County Yarns. And they're www.wee-county-yarns.co.uk. Kurt, maybe you could post a link. But they smell good too. They smell like wool. I have to tell you an experience. When I was going through the Master Hand Knitting program, I think it's level 2, you have to write a report about fiber. And knowing me, when I had to write a report about fiber, I didn't just look in books and read about fiber. I wanted to go touch and see and feel. Isn't it cool? It smells like wool. Wool off of a fleece. That's how a clean fleece smells. Not after it's been washed, but when it's been kept clean the whole time it's been growing on the sheet. So some of the things I did, I went and I visited 2 fiber mills because I wanted to actually see how they process the wool. I taught myself how to spin. I bought a spinning wheel. I bought a spindle first, so I learned how to spin, and then I taught myself, bought a wheel and bought all the books and did all the studying and all that stuff. But I also went to some fiber shows where they auction off, where they judge fleeces of sheep, alpaca, Angora rabbits. So I went and I sat. It took a couple years. I sat through these fleece judging things and I listened to the judges, and I was really, really fortunate. The first time I went, I was just in the right space at the right time. I didn't know what to expect, so there were some folding chairs set up, and the wool judging was supposed to start like at 1 o'clock. Well, at 11 o'clock, I grabbed some lunch and my knitting, and I went and I sat in one of the chairs because nobody was sitting in them, and I wanted to sit up front. So I got there a little early, and I ate my lunch and worked on my knitting, and pretty soon this man came and sat next to me, and he said he was saving the seat for his wife. And so he asked me, and I told him I wanted to learn, and I didn't know anything about fleeces, and I want just to learn. And he said, well, his wife might like to talk to me. He said, she spins in the grease. That's what he told me. I had no idea what spinning in the grease was. Spinning means spinning with a fleece that has not been scoured yet. So the woman showed up, his wife, and then pretty soon a ton of other people came. Thank goodness I had that front seat. And the judge came and they started judging the fleeces. And the judge was so good. He talked loud enough that I could hear him. Of course, I was sitting up front because I can't hear very well. So I always try to sit up front. And he was explaining every little detail. And he would pull off a little staple out of the fleece. And he would, see if it pinged. You're going ding, ding. It pings actually when you do that. And he showed how you can tell whether it was a female sheep or a male and whether she had a lamb that year. You can tell by looking at the wool and whether she was fed or he was fed appropriately all year long and all that kind of stuff. And he would pass these little staples around, and so we could all feel them and touch them. Well, it turned out the lady that's sitting next to me was also a fleece judge, a wool judge. And so what he didn't tell us, she did, because I told her I was studying, I was working on my master's in knitting, and I wanted to study fleeces. And so she sat there and she just taught me everything. It was so awesome. And then the next wool judging that I went to, she was the judge. And I got to sit up front again, and she remembered me, and she showed me everything in person all over again. It was so amazing. It was awesome. But what brought that up is the smell of that wool. When people put their fleeces for judging in a competition, those sheep are kept clean all year. For example, they shear them and then they cover them with a coat. It's like canvas, and it has a belt under the bottom so it keeps it on, doesn't fall off. And as their new fleece grows, they have to put larger and larger ones on throughout the year. So they're always changing the coat. And by the end of the year, the only place that's dirty on the fleece is the very underbelly and by where they urinate and defecate. And so the rest of the fleece is clean. So when people shear these fleeces and they submit them for judging, they are gorgeous. They are beautiful. And there's all these big bags. A fleece will fill a bag, and you could just stick your head in it. And the aroma of the lanolin is almost intoxicating. And that's what these smell like. It's not as heavy, but it has that lanolin, that clean lanolin smell. I love it. You know, like you like to smell coffee or good cigars. I like good lanolin. Okay, let's look at some more here. So that was a real gift, Kurt. Thank you. Urgent says, are Maggie Righetti's 2 books very different, or can I just pick up one of them? The one on knitting in plain English is just about knitting in general. She talks about just the stitch architecture, finishing, all the different increases and decreases, picking up stitches, drop stitches, joining fabrics. It's more about construction of knitting, not construction of garments. It's actually a good place to start. If you're trying to build a knitting library, I started with these types of books because I wanted to learn the architecture of knitting or the engineering of knitting. And isn't it interesting now they're using knitting for engineering? Isn't that cool? We knew that all along. So I started with these types of books. And then when I started getting more into knitting my own sweaters for myself, then I started collecting these types of books here. And I have even more. I'm not going to overwhelm you with all of the ones that I have at one time. I'll show some each time. Okay. The knitting in plain is a good knitting reference. It's an excellent knitting reference. Okay. Whoops, jumped up. The sweater design in plain English goes in more in depth on measuring and knitting sweaters. Exactly. It's about constructing your schematics, measuring, putting sweaters together, designing necklines and things like that. The Ultimate Knitting Book by Vogue, Urgent Artesia says she has the Ultimate Knitting Book by Vogue. That's an excellent resource. That's really the first one everybody should have. That's a basic one. Everybody should have that back. These are all in conjunction to that. It's good to have more than one point of view on each topic, because you'll find, or even just the same topic, but written by someone else, because they might say it in slightly different words that you go, oh, that's what that is. So that's one of the things we learn in the Master Hand Knitting program is how to research knitting. And I would look in every book I could find on each topic. So let's say I want to do a long tail cast on. I looked up long tail cast on in every single one of my books. Now that might be overkill, but you know what? I learned a lot about long tail cast on. And I did that for every single little technique. And you should see my books. They have Post-it notes sticking up from the top of every single one. And that's where I put my little, where I can find it again. And so reference good books are good if you like them. Bonnie Davis, she says, does Maggie Righetti discuss pattern grading? No. You know, I'm going to write that down. I got to find my Post-it notes. I know you want the answer to that question, and I'm going to find it for you because I don't know where it is, but I have a friend who does, and I'm going to get in touch with her. On Wednesday, I will have ideas for you on pattern grading. Okay, Bonnie? Okay, I promise. Okay. I know you want to do that. And it's really, a lot of people do their own thing. They create their own spreadsheets. But I know there's got to be a good resource somewhere for you. Urgent says, what is pattern grading? Pattern grading, let's say I designed my yellow and red sweater and it fit me, but I want to write it up as a pattern for people for multiple sizes. Grading means translating the stitch counts and all of the design elements into all those sizes. For example, I'm making my yoke 9 inches in depth. Well, for Claire, it needs to be 8 inches in depth. So I would have to write in my pattern the row and stitch calculations to result in an 8-inch yoke depth for her. So that means that whole pattern that I'm putting in might have to be altered somewhat to fit a smaller sweater. And it has to do with the neck openings, the length, the width, the arms, everything, every little aspect of the sweater. Grading is, you actually create an Excel spreadsheet and figuring out the stitch and row gauge and design elements for each size. And it's interesting.
Is it hard to do?
It's harder than knitting for me. But for some people, it's very easy to do. I have no problem with Excel spreadsheets. I don't have any problem with formulas and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, for example, let's say that you put yourself a formula in there that you're going to get so many stitches to the inch and the sleeve should be, 15 inches. And it turns out it's a half stitch, so and such and a half stitch. Are you going to round up or are you going to round down? And if you round up, how's that going to affect all the stitches after that turn out to be half stitches? So that part starts getting a little bit over the top of my head, and I don't like that. So it can get complicated. But I know there's resources out there, and I'll find them for you. Okay, that's why I don't want to write my designs into patterns. It's not fun for me, and I knit for fun. I teach for fun. I love doing this. This is fun for me. It's invigorating, stimulating. I love doing it. I do not like grading patterns. I can do it. I do not like it. And so I don't. I'm retired. I do what I want to do. Okay. Okay, Amber. Oh, Amber, thank you for putting the link there. I'll look at that later on. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, Maggie Righetti passed away. Well, I guess we aren't going to get to meet her. Thank goodness she left those books for us, huh? Tanya, hello. You're late, but you're here. Why are you making Claire sit on the floor? Nina wants to know why you're sitting on the floor. She's sitting over there knitting, and she's trying to be unobtrusive, but she is a very dear knitting friend of mine. I love Claire. If you need something, Claire will be there. I can tell you. You can count on Claire. She is totally awesome.
Thank you.
Judy Joyce says, hi, Suzanne and Claire from the high seas on her cruise. Yay, Judy! She's another one of our comrades here in Bakersfield. She says, oh my God, this worked. I'm on deck knitting on my way to the Panama Canal.
That is so
Yay.
cool. Hi, Judy.
We love you, Judy. Okay. So Sunny Belonga, hey all, if I understand the very first round is an increase round, seems a strange thing to do. Is it not better to do one round of knitting after the cast on? Actually, I did. I did one round of knitting because I'm thinking that's a provisional cast on. And if you do all those increases right in the provisional cast on, it's going to be a pain in the neck to pick those stitches back up. So I did that. I did knit one round after the provisional cast on. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Diana Danko says, according to her bio in her book, she lives in your area, Suzanne. And who is that? Is that Maggie? Or is that Sally Melville? Okay. Judy, we miss you too. We'll tell everybody on knitting. Jessica Jones, I love Shirley. She is putting out a new book. Now, there's some things that Sally Melville says that I don't agree with, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just that I don't particularly agree with them. She has some things in her. She has a book on knits and a book called about knitting or something, and one called purling. And there's some things in there I don't necessarily agree with, but overall, I love everything she has to say. Leslie wants to know what you're working on, Claire.
Oh, I'm working on a lefty.
It's a lefty. It's super cute. Her base yarn is a gray,
It's
a dark gray,
purple.
or purple.
It's
And then
Anzula.
she's got, it's Anzula. It's the Anzula squishy, the fingering weight.
I can't remember.
It's fingering weight.
I've been working on it for a year.
And then Anzula, is this one of her little short packs? The little short colors? What are those?
Yes.
Anzula is Sabrina Famelos, and Anzula is the name of her company. She is in a town that's about 100 miles north of us, and we actually know her. And we've been knowing her since she just started her company, Anzula, and her fibers are unbelievably beautiful. I highly recommend if you ever have access to them. But this is her pretty scarf. This is her mindless knitting that she carries around with her. So Luana Hendricks says, I could talk knitting 24/7. Yes, I could too. And remember when I had Arinda on here the other day, a couple weeks ago? Let me tell you, when Arinda and I are in the same room, no stopping us. It is so fun. And by the end of the day, you're exhausted. Because not only are you talking and having a good time, you're thinking. It makes you think. Okay. Let's see. This is Sunny. Oops, forgot question. Asked if first increase round really comes immediately after the cast on without knitting cast on stitches even one round before increases. The cast on depends on the provisional cast on that you use. I use the crocheted one on mine, so that does not count as a row. Now, if you use the provisional cast over waste yarn or a knitting needle, that first cast on counts as row 1. But it doesn't really matter. One row does not matter when you're knitting this sweater. It really doesn't matter. So now let's go over to the questions that people asked on Ravelry, okay? Last week, someone asked me about this lace design. And this is the little lace design that I have included in the tutorial. Isn't that cute? And this is with it knitted. This would be the top, knitting this way. So if a top down, this is how the design would look. That's a double row. Actually, this is one full repeat of the pattern. This is a half a repeat where I just did one. So I was thinking it'd be really cute in a yoke sweater if you did this up where you have the short sections and then added this downward and have, a couple rows of garter stitch or just something in between. You could even do one of those rows where you do a garter ridge and then knit yarn over, knit together, yarn over, knit, or do your increases in here and then have the double lace come down after that. Isn't that pretty? With the beads in it. See the beads? There's purple beads in there. That would be so pretty. I love it. So somebody asked about that. You can't really do increases or decreases in that, but you could place it in between the rounds of the increases and decreases. This is from Masha on Ravelry. She says, would it be more accurate a measurement of yoke depth if you measured from the shoulder nearest the neck to the armpit? You would then subtract to account for where you wanted the sweater to begin. I'm confused about using the armhole depth as measured on page 7. Thanks, Suzanne. So in our book of top-down sweaters here, and the schematic for the yokes, she shows, this is the schematic right here, these three, but this is the yoke depth, and she shows measuring from the top of the shoulder down to the bottom of the yoke depth over on the side. And this top of this line does not line up with the top front of the sweater. It actually lines up with the back of the sweater. So that makes me think that on your body, you're measuring from here down to the yoke where it's going to hit at your underarm. And if I measure that, I get the same length as my yoke depth that I'm using for my pattern. So the yoke depth should not come past your underarm. When the yoke needs to stop before your underarm, because you don't want the yoke being pulled down into the underarm. That does not look good. So here's my underarm. So my yoke would need to stop before here. And if I measure from up here or the top of the shoulder down here, that's what I'm getting. I don't know if that's the right answer or the wrong answer. And I've looked in all of my books and I don't find anything definitive. So we're all sort of guessing. And I would like to really find the definitive answer of not how do you measure the yoke on the schematic, but how do you measure the yoke on your body? What part of your body are you using to decide how long do you want the yoke to be, rather than just holding it up to you or using someone else's advice? How did she decide that? So that's the answer that I would like to find. And I would like to find it in more than one book. So I've been looking and I will keep looking. But that's a great question, Masha. This is from Passing Remarks. She says, question about journal writing, your designs in notebooks. I've used campus notebooks for other things. And she gives a link to the campus notebooks. This notebook is 50 smooth paper pages lined but with dots in the lines. I'm guessing to help students with diagram and drawing pages. The question is this: have you used your notebooks for charting? Do you think with the dots it could be done? Yes, you could. Now, I also have other books up here. I have a whole stack up here of charting things, books with charts in them. I have this one. This is a moleskin book. It's all charts, the whole thing. And I use this. I take this with me when I go on vacation. And I draw my little pictures in here. And I write out my little stitch patterns. And I have several in here. So this is where I kind of like write my notes. Here's when I was doing, they see a pansy. But you have to remember that if you're using something like this, and here's my pansy picture. I actually put some pansies in my photocopier and made a copied page. And then I drew the lines around the leaves of real pansies. And then I charted my pansies. The problem is that when you do something like that, the squares are square. And as I told you before, stranded knitting, the stitches are more square than regular stitches, but they're not absolutely square, but they're closer. So you have to swatch and see. You don't want your pansies coming out squished. You want them nice and round. And that's how I pick designs. Like I saw somebody on Facebook or Ravelry that was looking for a trout. They wanted to chart a trout. Well, you find a picture of a trout you like, you make a photocopy of it, and then you start putting it on charting paper. There are also online, and Cindy McBride's on here. I know I saw her a while back. There are online charting things that you can put a picture in, and it will place a chart right over your picture. And you can pick what size you want the stitches to be. So, but then I have, for other things, I have knitter's graph paper. So this is 5 rows and 7 stitches to the inch. You can't really see it. It's too bright. Let me turn this off. Can you see it? You can sort of see it when I hold it like that. This is knitter's graph paper, and I have a bunch of these. And I also write in these. So see here, I've got stuff going on. There's a schematic of a back of a sweater. And I have several of these, and I carry them around in my knitting bags. So those are just resources that you can use for knitting and charting. And I don't remember what that brought that on, but okay, over here, yes, she was journaling, and the journal with the dots. This is Blue Flax Knits. Question: would you explain stitch equivalency some more? I have a stitch gauge of 5.5 for main color and 7 for color work. By adding stitches to the first row of color work, wouldn't that change the color work pattern? Okay, so how you figure it out, this is how you figure it out. First, you would have to get your stitch gauge for your stockinette, and then your stitch gauge for your color work. You have to translate the stitch gauge for your color work to the perimeter of the area that you want. So let's say I wanted to have 58 inches, my total circumference of my yoke, then I know I need to have 58 inches of the stitch gauge of my stitch pattern. And then I need to fit my stitch pattern into the 58 inches, which means you may have to do some adjustments here or there. You may have to add a few stitches. Now this is a multiple of 28 stitches across here. Across this part here is actually from down here up here. I'm still adding stitches. Do you see the boo-boo? I found a boo-boo right there. There's 2 missing stitches. Yep, they're missing. Anyway, it's a swatch. But so I have 28 stitches from here to here. You can see it's 28 up here too, because this isn't the one that I increased. Let's look at my yoke. Where's the yoke? Okay, so here is the same thing. It's 28 stitches by the time I got down to here. From here to here is 28 stitches, but you can see up here it's much narrower. So I had to do some adjustments on my chart to remove stitches. I removed stitches in the chart so that this would still fit. Or your design has to fit all within area that has increases above or below it, but no increases in the design. Since my design is very long, it passes through an increase zone. So there was an increase around here, and then I made more increases in here, and I staggered them over several rows. I think I made 6 increases between here and down here and staggered them. But your end stitch count down here, your colorwork pattern needs to fit in that, however you want it to fit. Now you can have half patterns if you're doing a cardigan. Here's the front somewhere. Here's the front. So it turns out for mine, it worked out that I could have a whole pattern on either side of my steek. But let's say that it didn't work out. I could have a half a pattern on each side and it would still look okay center front, because there's nowhere else where you can make that adjustment. The whole rest of it, you want to have the full pattern. You can't have a partial pattern anywhere. So you would not figure out your stitch count on your stockinette and try to fit your color work into the stockinette. You do it the other way. That's having the carriage before the horse. You have to figure out the stitch count on the color work portion, figure out how many inches you're going to need, how many stitches of that stitch count, stitches per inch, will fit into those inches, then see if your pattern elements will fit into that. Then you would reduce your number for the stockinette, because the stockinette doesn't matter. You're not going to be putting any stitch design elements into that. Does that make sense? I think that's all the questions over there on Ravelry. Let's see. We've done 1 hour and 7 minutes. Let's see if I have any more over here. Let's see. Whoops, jumped again. Question, what's the best way to resolve my German short rows in the round? Oh, so short rows, somebody else asked that question. When you're working short rows are always worked flat because you're going back and forth. And you'll never hear the term short rounds. It's short rows. So when you're working rounds, that means you're going in a circle, right? When you're working rows, it means you're going back and forth flat. Rounds is in the round. Rows is always worked flat. It's short rows. So that means they're worked back and forth because you work over, turn, work back, turn, work back, turn. So you're always working back and forth until you've finished all your short rows, and then you work in the round again. In the method that I showed here, and I'm going to do, it might maybe a blog post because it's easier to show pictures than it is to show it on a video. the difference between, we had a lot of talking about whether you start with the shortest short row or the longest short row when you're working from the top down. And there, it makes perfect sense. And Francoise posted her swatches over there on Ravelry and showed the difference. When you're going from top down, you do the shortest one first, going out to the longest. If you're working from bottom up, you do the longest, going to the shortest. When you happen to be doing top down and you work the shortest one, when you come back, you pick up the wrap or conceal it, or if it's German short rows, you work your double stitch, and then you turn, you make another double stitch, and you come back, you work past the first one and conceal it, then go to the next place where you're going to turn, come back. So you're always concealing the wraps as you come to them. When you're finished, you'll have one short row on each end that has not been concealed when you go back to knitting in the round. And when you come back around to those on the right side, those will be double stitches. When you asked about German short rows, you're making double stitches. You just knit them together as one stitch, and it should look just fine. Okay. Nina Kellen says she predicts I'll solve the yoke depth mystery myself and publish it. Somebody's got to have written about it somewhere, you know, or else it's just mysterious, because if it were so easy, you would think it would be published everywhere, but I haven't seen it. Okay. Oh, Mary Inman says, I've been using my iPad and Apple Pencil to work on charts. I download knitting graph paper. How fun. I have to try that. Cindy McBride says she uses Stitch Fiddle. She's the one that I said that she does, puts a chart over a photograph, and then you can chart it. She actually has knitted photographs of people, and they're just unbelievably beautiful. Really beautiful. Hello, Claudio. Nice to see you here. Sunny Belong, a question. My increases are eyelets, so knowing yoke depth is crucial. Also, needing a neck opening wider than a typical crew neck means all of my increases have to happen over a depth of maybe 4 inches, but you'll have a lot less increases, because if you start, let's see, here's my crew neck. Okay, so it's less inches around, right? Fewer stitches. Then there's this neck. It's bigger out, but it's starting out with a lot more stitches right off the bat. So we resolved this part. We don't need to have the increases between here and here. And if you have your neck opening even bigger, you're going to start with even larger stitch count. So it's all proportional. Let's see. Let me see here. So this, for a crew neck, this would be your neck opening and your first round of increases. And then I've divided mine over 3. I like the 3, but it depends on what you want to do and what design elements you want to put in. You can divide it over 4 or 5, however many you want, but each subsequent ring gets wider. See, this one is this wide. This one is twice the width. So here we have our increases, increases, increases. If we want to start here, this part of our neck, and have a bigger neck opening, then we start with the stitch count that would have been here. And we do then the first round of increases right after we have our first round, which is a provisional round or not. But we don't have the increase round here. It's gone now, because we're starting out with that number already and then increasing after it. Does that make sense? If you want to start halfway between here and here, then you're going to have half as many stitches for here, and you won't have as many increases. So it's not like all of your increases have to fit in a shorter space. You're going to have many less stitches. It's not proper English. I don't know what is, but you're going to have way fewer stitches to increase because you'll have a lot more in your cast on. Claudio says, question, after increasing for the color work, do you decrease again for the stockinette? Yep. So when I get down to the bottom of my design element, I had 8 stitches per inch for this, and I have 7 stitches per inch for this. So I will decrease 1 stitch every inch right across the bottom of my yoke before I get to my stockinette section. Yes, excellent question. And Claudio says, what stitch do you use for increasing? I've been using make ones. I think they're the least visible. If you're working in something that has a texture to it, knit front and back blends in pretty good. Lifted increases are not necessarily my favorite. Some people think that they're less visible than make ones. I think make ones are pretty invisible. So try them on a swatch and see which one you think looks the best. Jillian, question, which type of increases do you recommend for the yoke? The make one left or make one right makes the stitch next to it smaller and it looks quite visible. It depends on how you're making your make ones. There's a lot of confusion. Some people use the term make one for a variety of increases. A make one is a specific increase. It's where you lift the bar between the 2 stitches and either knit into the front or the back of it, depending on which way you want the increase to lean. I used make ones, and they do not show very much in my fabric. In fact, in this portion down here, but you can't see the stitches very well, but down in here, this part, this is where I made increases in here. And I have a picture of this on Ravelry where you can see the full yoke in a circle, and you can look and see if you can see the stitches. Here's an increase round right here. And the only thing that tells you that's the increase round is there's a lot more stitches below it than above it. But it's up to you. Swatch it. It's not a rule. I'm not making a rule. I'm not saying you need to do it one way or another. It's personal preference. You swatch your increases and see what you think and how they look. Leslie Dunn, question, if you're working the longest short row first, would that mean that when you finally go in the round, you'll be working all those wraps in one round? Yes. Yep. That's what that means. Question, Nature Crafts, how to maintain even tension with stockinette knit flat? Well, it depends on what the tension issues are that you're having. We had a big discussion about this in my knitting class this week. So, some people say, when you get gutters on the back of your work, do you know what gutters are? Those lines between the rows. Every 2 rows, you get a big line. Those are called gutters. Some people call that rowing out. I call those gutters. And then if you get changes on the edges of your fabric where you've got big spaces on the back, I call that rowing out. But, different people apply those terms differently. If you're getting gutters on the back of your work, either your knits are bigger than your pearls or your pearls are bigger than your knits, one or the other. Now, a lot of references in the United States say that if you have gutters, that your pearls are bigger than your knits. And I think that's because a lot of the people that wrote those books are English style knitters or throwers. I'm a continental knitter. I used to have gutters in the back of my work, and I studied and studied and studied to try to solve the situation like for a year, because everything I read said that the pearls are bigger than the knits if you have that problem. So I would try to make my pearls tighter, and my gutters got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I walked around and I tried to see people knitting. I watched people who were knitting continental to see how they're knitting. What were they doing different than I was doing? Well, it turns out I was doing this little pushing mechanism with my finger when I made the knits, and it made my knits bigger, not my pearls. My knits were bigger. Once I stopped pushing the yarn around the needle with my finger, my knits became the same size as my pearls and my gutters went away. Then I did a test with my guild quite a few years ago. There were probably like 30 people there that day. I took yarn. So everybody was using the same yarn, and they all brought a US 7 needle. I took worsted weight yarn, and everybody had some yarn, and we cast on like 20 stitches and knitted flat for, like 10 or 12 rows. And then I had them end after working a purl row. And then we took a black felt marking pin and marked the the stitches on the, mark those stitches that are on the needle so we could see those. That was the purl row. We blacked them a little bit, just put dots on them. And then we took the whole thing off of our needle, cut all the edge stitches off, like cut two stitches off of each end. So now we have 16 stitches across, and we pulled out the last 2 strands. So the one with the black dots was the purl stitches. The one with no dots were the knit stitches. And then we measured them to see if one was longer than the other. About half the room, all their stitches were the same length. So both strands were the same. The other half of the room, half of them had their knit strand was longer. The other half had the purl strand was longer. Then I divided the room in half by who was, or the groups by who was a continental knitter versus a thrower. And guess what? All the people that had a longer knit strand were continental knitters. And all the people that had a longer purl strand were throwers. So it is a common issue with continental people to have enlarged knits. It is not always the purls, but that's how you figure it out. There's other ways to do it too. You can, lots of different ways to try to figure out whether your knits or purls are bigger. And then, by that method, you could see how much they were bigger because how much yarn there was left over between the two. Let's see, Nature Crafts question. If I can crochet an adult cardigan, can I knit adult cardigan easily? I don't know what your knitting experience is, but if you're a good crocheter, I'm sure you could switch over to knitting. Knitting's fun. You could do it. Just don't start with anything complex and just go for it. Jump in. Oh, this is a really good one. Jack Richard. Thank you. Jack Richard said, you're the first American that I saw live stream and not talking about politics. Thank you. There's something about Americans and politics that's unbelievable. We don't talk politics. We talk knitting. Knitting transcends everything. Everything. I'm not going to ever discuss anything that is controversial. I'm just not going to because I'm a knitter. We don't need to do that. Okay. Well, it's nice. I always thought it was my purls causing problems. My ribbing is sometimes ugly and it makes me mad. Watch some of my videos over on the other channel. I have a really good one on making even ribbing and how to fix it and make it look better. Bonnie says, wow, I'm a thrower and it's my knit stitches that are larger. Leave it to me to be different. Of course, of course. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? We're going to pull it to an end here. This is Sunday, so the next time we'll be here is at noon Pacific Daylight Time on Wednesday. Most Wednesdays you'll find me here noon Pacific Daylight Time, unless I'm going to be out of town or something. And then on Sundays at 2:00 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I want to thank Claire. She was a good sport.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes, love my Claire.
And in answer to all your questions, yes, I do know how lucky I
am. So we'll see you back here on Wednesday. And next Friday, the information will come out about the lower waist shaping and the pockets. Yay! So happy knitting. You guys take care. Have a good day. That was fun.
That was fun.